Winmei, how are you?
Great, thank you. Nice to see you.
Pleasure's all mine. I've been looking forward for this for a while. You are by far one of the most interesting guests on our docket. Not often do we get to talk quantum because primarily it's not the space I operate in, but I'm so glad to have you on the show. Give us a little intro to yourself, the company, and also some of the other projects you work on.
Sure. So I'm Wenmiao, one of the co-founders of Quantum Dice. We are a spin-out from the University of Oxford, been around since 2019, which is where my co-founders and I met through the university's first student entrepreneurs program. We met having never really worked together or known each other before, spent 4 weeks working day to day and pitched initially for our idea for a business that uses quantum technologies to enhance encryption, won some seed funding, and then slowly the team and the business grew from there. And for me, being a founder, being a startup founder, that's the only job that I've known. And I think my own startup journey just ran alongside my own understanding of what mental well-being is. And earlier this year, I launched as a side project the Low to Grow podcast.
I love it. Can we talk quantum for a second? You've got to help me understand and help the audience understand what you're building and why it's so important today.
So essentially, we are helping to enhance existing cybersecurity. And why that's important is, because the core that we're on right now, for example, this live stream, everything that is sensitive or that contains data needs to be encrypted in order to make sure that information gets from the person that's trying to send it. So myself in this instance to the person that it's intended for, which is you at the moment. And governments, businesses, even personal like individuals, there are lots of data that's very sensitive. And if a malicious third party attacks it, then they basically have a hold over us. And of course, there could be financial repercussions as well. So what we're doing is any type of encryption depends on the source of random numbers to make the encryption keys. And what we're building at Quantum Dice is using quantum technologies to build a self-certifying source of random numbers, which are then used to make encryption keys. And this works both for classical and also for some of the post-quantum security protocols being developed.
Why is this the hard problem that you wanted to spend your time working on compared to what else you could put your mind to?
So for me personally, my background is in chemistry. So I guess I'm probably, a scientist at heart. And what I really wanted to do, from after leaving university and what my first job would be, is actually to put myself in a position where I can really have this hands-on experience of taking something that's being done in a research lab or being published in papers and actually bringing it as a market, or as a product into the market and to have businesses and to have even individual perhaps someday to be able to use it. And luckily, I was able to do this program, met my co-founders, and I was just really excited by the impact that cybersecurity could have in our world. And this was back in 2019, so this was before COVID, which brought on the whole work from home and also remote working attitude and culture that we now have. So I think for us, it's been really interesting to see that develop over the past few years. And for me, it's just really interesting because I have put myself in a position as a founder, someone that is really trying to create this new market for quantum technologies. And I'm just really enjoying the challenges that throws day to day.
Is it a hard challenge?
Oh, for sure. I'd be surprised if any startup founder or any founder of any enterprise, it could be a social enterprise, even finds it easy. And in a way, I think it's the challenges that keep me going because I think when there's a challenge, it means that there's a clear problem. And when there's a problem, then it's something that can be solved. And that's the, I think, day-to-day activity that really, really drives me personally.
Okay, break it down for me. Five co-founders is a lot, right? Not typically do you find yourself in that instance. I think of what Airbnb is one of the few that had a significant number of co-founders. How do you manage something like that, especially when you sort of come together quite quickly and then build out this idea over what is a considerable piece of time now? Talk me through how that came together.
Well, I guess now's a good time to shout out to my four other co-founders.
Love it.
And as you said, five co-founders over 5 years now, that's actually quite an achievement. But back in the day, I think Rami, Jeanette, George, and Marco and I, we faced a lot of questions, especially when we were raising our first round before we had any traction at all, about, what are you five students basically going to be able to do that other professionals can't in bringing quantum tech to the cybersecurity industry? And how we met was actually through the student program that I mentioned earlier called Step Ignite, which actually the university still runs at the moment. And we all came together and formed a team because we all chose this particular piece of technology to work on. So I guess it's the technology and this scientific innovation that really drew us together. And for my co-founders and I think we were all from, I guess, physics, chemistry, or maths backgrounds. And I think that actually helped a lot because it meant that when we analyze problems, we generally can be on the same page. But saying that, I think five co-founders, we all have very different personalities, and that's actually played out to the bonus of our company because it meant that from day one, you had five completely dedicated co-founders who are willing to go above and beyond, working day and night, working weekends to try and get this venture off the ground. And in the early days of a startup, when everything is so uncertain, I think it's really just the grit and that persistence in keep sending out emails to potential VCs, in keeping to send out emails to potential buyers, in keeping to send out emails to potential media. And I think that's what allowed us to gain that foundation that then, gained momentum and started to get us into grants with national institutions and also to raise VC funding. And then also now, of course, to have some of our larger early enterprise clients on board.
I've got to ask, how hard was that raise? Five co-founders must have been a difficult question, as you mentioned, for most of the VCs to kind of look at and go, like, well, why do you need five? Like, how does this all work? And how big was the raise that you did?
Yep, so for that first raise, it was £2 million, half coming from institutional VCs and also half coming from, I think, various Innovate UK grant funding
We
for
love to
early
see it.
stage R&D development. So it was quite a sizable pre-seed, and we did start that raise as five co-founders. I think, in the end, as with any fundraise, it's almost like a project that can be project managed and deadlines can be achieved. But I'll just talk a little bit about when we actually started that raise. So we didn't go out and raise as soon as we started the company, or even after we gained that first amount of cash prize funding after that first month. We only raised seriously probably about a year after we had, started thinking about the company. And incidentally, we kind of like formed the company legally in April 2020, which is, smack bang in the middle of COVID. So
Do you mind me asking why? Why'd you wait a year? Like off the back of the grant, you could have had that energy, that momentum. Was it that you needed to think about like building the thesis of what you were going to move forward to work on over the next 5 years and then raise off the back of that? Or was it that it just was the wrong time?
So it wasn't the grant that we had. So it was after that first month, we won some prize money from our local VC that sponsored a program that we were on, which was Oxford Science Enterprises. And that was just 25,000. So that allowed us to actually create a demo that we owned and also to do initial business development and also to do research. And in that time, myself and one other co-founder, George, we had both also just completely finished with our degrees. So we were able to apply to a quantum technology specific accelerator based in Bristol. And that actually gave us two salaries for another year, as well as more business development grants. So these were all equity-free grant funding opportunities that we had. And we used that time to kind of like network with the quantum ecosystem in the UK. And also through that network, actually met a lot of the investors that we ended up speaking with. So I think in the beginning, we were just very, mindful of what can be received without having to give away equity, whilst also looking for opportunities to upskill ourselves as founders of a deep tech company in the meantime, because we were also very conscious that we were in our early 20s and we have just left university, and this is going to be all of our first time building a company.
How strong is the quantum community in the UK and Europe?
Ooh, very strong and growing, and I would say the UK actually probably has one of the earliest and I guess stronger clusters of quantum companies in the UK and Europe. And I think that's because I think just over 10 years ago, the UK had its first wave of quantum focused research funding that finished. And off the back of that, a lot of the current quantum based startups or scale ups in the UK actually, spun up from. So I think at the QTech program, there was a handful of other quantum companies in our cohort, and we still see them at conferences. And I would say a lot of the UK-based quantum company that have spun out from university, they actually came through that particular program. So it was a very good government and grant kind of like leveraged structure for deep tech founders who are very academic to be able to gain the commercialization skills that they need in order to build a company.
Get technical with me for a moment, all right? We're going to try and explain explicitly what happens at quantum dice, the quantum phenomena of how you use that as a randomness source. Break it down for me like I'm a child.
Yep, for sure. So, hands up, I'm not a quantum physicist, so this is something that I have to learn, and hopefully I'll be able to kind of like break it down. So essentially, quantum just means one kind of like light particle, and what we do is we use light particles to generate true randomness. And stay with me here, randomness is what's needed to make encryption keys. And encryption keys are like the bedrock of any type of cryptography systems that we see in the current day and that are being developed using post-quantum protocols as well. So existing random number generators, they can come from radioactive decay, or they can also come from flipping a coin, for example, but then that's really slow. They could also come from a really beautiful wall of lava lamps. If you haven't seen it, Google Cloudflare lava lamp random number generator, and you'll see this really beautiful image, super colorful, a great visual for showing how we can get randomness from the bubbles floating and how that can be used to then make encryption keys. So we researched and we spoke to people in the industry, and we understood from a lot of the kind of expert cybersecurity engineers that actually generating true random numbers can be done without using quantum technologies at all. And that's what's being used at the moment. But what is lacking is a way to have a live monitor of exactly how much randomness is being generated. And it's almost like a sense check to make sure that you, as the security engineer, that the random number generator that you're using hasn't been hacked in some way or hasn't just failed by itself in some way. So it's having this live monitor for randomness quality that was missing. And this is what the patented technology that was developed at Oxford and that we are commercializing at Quantum Dice is able to do.
Is that the disk trademarked?
Yep, exactly. So I'm glad you mentioned DISC. The scientific term is called Source Device Independent Self-Certification, quite a mouthful. We've just shortened it to DISC. And essentially, it's a protocol that continuously monitors our hardware device, and it's able to both detect and react to any physical changes in real time. So, these changes could come from someone changing the temperature around it. It could also come from the hardware device just breaking down over time. But anyway, this DISC protocol continuously monitors it, and it's able to kind of like remove any interference from the environment around it to make sure that what leaves our device is guaranteed to be true randomness only coming from a quantum source. And why quantum is important here is because quantum mechanics is fundamentally probabilistic and statistical. So it's where you can get true randomness.
Explain true randomness to me. I don't quite understand it.
Yep. So for example, there are, I say, 3 types of random number generating capabilities out there. There's pseudo random number generators, and these are computer algorithms, and you can access these really easily online or via your computer. And these kind of like string of numbers repeat after a certain amount of time, which is why they're called pseudo-random. But of course, if you use pseudo-random number generators as your source to make encryption keys in your cybersecurity protocol, you will be compromising the security of your overall system simply because the numbers repeat after a certain amount of time. So what we're using is kind of the quantum process to generate true randomness, which doesn't have any patterns and doesn't repeat, and hence you can be quite assured of the quality of the random numbers that is being used to make encryption keys that underpin the cybersecurity protocol. I think one image that I find quite helpful is thinking of cryptography like building a house. You can build a house using super strong bricks, so using really sophisticated cybersecurity or cryptographic methods. But if you build that house on a foundation of sand, and the sand here, or the foundation here, is the random number generator. So if you build it on a foundation of sand, then that house will fall down at some point because the sand is quite fickle. But if you replace the sand with, a much stronger foundational ground, so if you change the pseudo-random number generator to a high-quality random number generator, then you're absolutely increasing the overall stability of the structure that you're building.
I love it. Thank you so much for breaking that down. I've had so many questions. The research can only do so much justice, but hearing it from the team that's actually building it brings it all to life in such a unique way.
Yep. I think for us as a team, it was also really interesting because of our more, I guess, technical and scientific backgrounds to then kind of like switch our mind from thinking like a scientist who's being trained to kind of like have a hypothesis, do research, write papers, to thinking like someone who is trying to sell a new product and who is trying to build a market.
I've got to
And for
ask, do
me,
you think about it the same way? Do you think about it as like, I have a hypothesis on how I'm going to do this, I execute against that, take the learnings, and then apply back the feedback loop?
I think in an overarching way, yes, but I think what we're looking for has changed from academia to kind of like a startup or making a new market. For now, it's not just about, okay, what new features can our technology do? It's actually about, okay, what business value does the features that only, our product could offer actually bring to someone who would want to use it in their companies? And, for them, sure, it might help them to make a better solution, but are there any other benefits? So for example, is it part of like a larger work stream that they're working on? Is it part of, maybe government mandates that they need to adhere to? Is it part of a new set of standards that they really need to make sure that they tick the box on? So it's just opening our mind up to considering all those other different, I guess, checks that need to be done in order to sell a product into this market.
When we think about like Google's quantum computer coming online, Microsoft's quantum chips coming online, how does that affect the work you're doing? Does it just mean that it's going to be easier to break quantum cryptography, or is it going to be just as difficult?
Yeah, really good question. So we don't build cybersecurity protocols or cryptography. We actually sell to companies that build larger cybersecurity systems, and we sell to both companies that are, building or managing or kind of like improvising on classical cryptography, as well as to companies that are building post-quantum cryptographic systems. So for us, we have an existing market, but we can also be used with any kind of feature type of quantum proof security as well. With regards to your question of the chip coming online and all the advances in quantum computing worldwide, both in industry and also in academic institutions, it's quite a big plus for us because a lot of time in the market we are kind of categorized alongside with post-quantum cryptography and also quantum key distribution. And generally, this wider bucket of post-quantum security tools um, will become more and more necessary, especially when quantum computing gets to a certain state of, I guess, relevance that they can actually break classical protocols as well. So for us, it's a plus, and it's really exciting to see about all of these, I guess, advancements in the sector that's slightly out of QINGs.
When you think about the future of the company and the space in general, the quantum space in general, and as these protocols continue to develop, where does quantum dice go?
Yep. So for Quantum Dice, we actually have iterated a bit on what our product offering is, and I think this is just a healthy sign of a startup responding to market feedback. So initially, we started just selling hardware and really large pieces of hardware because we thought these quantum random number generators they are going to fit into servers and like data centers, and that's what we kind of like initially built with. But then, from speaking with some of our early clients that we did kind of like collaborations and also projects with, we found out that they actually wanted two other versions that we don't have. So one is a much smaller, lighter weight, kind of almost on-chip quantum random number generator, and that is to embed into kind of smartphones or even consumer level devices,
Wow.
so that even the day-to-day consumer, such as you and I, can have access to higher quality of encryption keys.
Would that be
And
that shrinking the would that be shrinking the hardware you currently have down into like an on chip?
yep, exactly. So right now, I think our first version was probably larger than like a large MacBook, and quite a lot thicker. And we actually now have prototypes of our on-chip quantum random number generator, and it's probably the size of my smallest fingernail. So this is a really exciting area because there are a lot of, I guess, technical and also manufacturing challenges that still exist. But it's something that I think our team are very well placed to be able to address. And then in parallel to that, the other kind of product that we have introduced as a result of market feedback is some customers, they don't want to touch our hardware at all. They just want to be able to have the random numbers from our disk quantum random number generator to be able to try it in some of their network security kind of like solutions, and to be able to maybe in the future also set up their own kind of like network to be able to send random numbers without having to have hardware. So this is what we then built through something called a quantum entropy as a service. So this is like a cloud-based solution. We host the hardware, and following the NIST kind of like standard for EAS, we're able to then securely distribute the random numbers from our device to any customer that might need it, no matter where they are in the world.
I've got to ask, let me pivot slightly. How do you do this and have time to host a podcast?
So I think for me, I am a very creative person. And I think for me, on my day-to-day job, it's very much in the deep tech area. And for me, I have a lot of questions and I also have a lot of uncertainties. It could be, how do I address this particular market? How do I get more visibility for the products? Like, are we having the right strategy, et cetera, et cetera? And I also have, a lot of doubts as well. Am I the right person to be working in the quantum field, given that I don't have a PhD in quantum physics? So what I found in the past few years is I would just go out and have conversations with people. And these aren't long conversations, but these are conversations with, people who either have built and sold technology companies themselves, or maybe they're working in corporate, maybe they are social entrepreneurs. And I find that every time I have a conversation with them, I learn something that is useful for me. And I also find it quite therapeutic, almost learning from them about, what personal challenges that they had faced or what professional challenges that they had faced that then kind of almost inspire them to create something new or to rethink how they want to approach a situation in their life. There's a quote that I really love, which I think my dad always tells me. I think my dad always says, sometimes when you are stuck on a problem, go and do something completely different, because then that's when your subconscious mind actually works. And that's when a lot of good creative solutions could come about.
I love it. I think that like I've listened to a couple of episodes just because we have to do research for the show and understand our guests deeply. You had a Hannah on. She's awesome, isn't she?
Yeah, she's fantastic.
Learn so much, and it's great. It almost feels like a recharge every time you talk to these hyper ambitious individuals that are like also solving their own hard problems.
Yep, for sure. So interesting that you mentioned Ahana, because we are both building companies that's technology focused, but in very different areas. Hers is in beauty tech and mine is in quantum technologies. But every time that I have a conversation with her, there's always something that we are able to share with each other that helps our grow. And I think it's this almost like candid value exchange that's just quite organic, and it comes because you are maybe similar types of people, both trying to build something. And yeah, I think there are a lot of similarities between our companies, even if on the surface they might seem to be in completely different sectors.
You look down the line at your life's work, and do you feel that quantum dice is going to be so significant it's going to define you as an individual because of the hard problem that you're solving?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think one mistake that I made early on is actually attach too much of my self-worth to my company, which is the startup. And Viraj, I can tell you, there were probably a good few years in the early days when when I almost felt like my life was like a roller coaster, because as a startup,
Really?
you apply for so many opportunities, you put yourself out there a lot, and you also get rejected a lot. And sometimes it's within your control, sometimes it's just, factors outside of your control. And what I had to learn in that process is almost to have like a emotional boundary between who I am, what fulfills me, what I want to achieve, and also the success of the company. And I think having that clear emotional distinction actually allows me to be more effective in my job, because then I can just, I guess, more objectively make business decisions. And it might, you know, not always be a good decision. It might be a bad decision. It might be a good decision, but then it doesn't really impact how I feel and how I live and also how I live my life, really.
I've got to ask, it would be a disservice not to. How do you sell a product in the deep tech space? Is it the same as selling software, or is there a nuance to it that you figured out?
Oh, so for Quantum Dice, we build hardware, but we also sell kind of like almost like subscription-based
Yep.
models. My only experience has been in Quantum Dice. What I have found work from my personal experience is in the relationship building. And I've realized that for us, our sales cycles are very long. And that's partly because of the nature of, selling hardware. It was also because of the, I guess, relatively nascent nature of the quantum technologies industry. I think what I've realized is that relationships do matter, and a lot of times recommendations or word of mouth just really helps to give that initial credibility with a prospect that just cold email outreach won't do. And I think that's why for the past few years I've made so much of a conscious effort to really kind of like involve myself in a lot of the industry-wide organizations such as the Quantum Business Innovation and Growth Group at the Institute of Physics or the UK Young Academy, because I've realized it's by contributing to the overall growth of the industry. So perhaps having like an organizational role or having like a promotional role that then actually helps to get Quantum Dice's name out there. Because I think, as you're probably also very aware, the world gets smaller the longer you spend in an industry. And we've definitely seen that happen with Quantum.
I love what you're building. I love it because it's so different to anything I spend my time in. And so when you said that you'd come on the show, I was like, yes, I get to just dabble in something that it just blows my mind that people are able to build. This has been an absolute pleasure. I'm looking forward to having you on again. I'd love to hear more from the other team, but also in person, maybe we can do a live stream together and get all the founders talking.
No, that's wonderful. I love what you're doing and I love the format of it. And I think it's great that you have such like a condensed area block of time, but you have such a variety of founders. And yeah, really excited to be hearing more from the guests after me as well.
I appreciate it. This has been awesome. I'm going to let you go back to changing the world. Thanks so much for the time.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.